Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. The night is dark and full of terrors, and the Bretonnians will be lighting the darkest night as they face off against the Greenskins in this Warhammer World Championship matchup, with RiffleShuffle commanding the Bretonnians, and we'll have Alfredino will be on the Greenskins. So for the front line for the Bretonnians, we do have just a bunch of peasant mobs just spread very far across the engagement, and then on the flanks we do have quite a bit of mobility, as well as we have some Knights of the Realm, 3 units on this side, and on the left flank we do have a pair of questing knights. For the Lord, it is going to be King Lewin Leon Kerr. He is going to be bringing his Sword of Corone, which is a nice little debuff centered around himself, minus 24 melee defense and 30 armor. And then we have the Lion Shield as well, which gives him 44% missile resist and magic resist for 22 seconds. And then we have Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, and then of course he does have the beloved Son of Bretonnia, giving him that immune to psychology, and the Lady Champion that gives him a nice little bit of regen, as long as he does keep his leadership. Once his leadership does break, he is going to be done in terms of healing, and will then have to rely on the Damsel of Life, who is going to be bringing Earthblood and Regrowth, healing up all of that cav, and then also if King Lewin needs a little bit of extra of a kick, we'll be giving him some healing as well. For the range department, we do have some peasant bowmen with pox arrows sitting off in the kind of the third line here, as we do have the Battle Pilgrims and the Holy Wardens of La Maison-Tel. So the Holy Wardens, they do come in with fire and magic attacks, and both of those are actually very helpful against the Greenskins. The magic attacks will be able to help pierce through that physical resist of the Savage Orcs, and then we have the flaming attacks, which will help against a lot of the regen units that the Greenskins are so known for. And then for the back line, it is just going to be a couple of Spearmen at Arms, just kind of keep these bowmen nice and safe. And that is going to be it for the Bretonnians. So for the Greenskins, we do have Morgrub's Mangy Marauders mixed in with some Force Goblin Spider Riders and some Goblin Wolf Rider Archers as well. So lots of skirmishing. So the Morgrub's Mangy Marauders do have armor piercing. And of course, all of the Force Goblin Spider Riders do have poison with their attacks. So very useful. Plenty of poison to go on both sides of the field, but there is also going to be some mobility on the Greenskins, as we do have those Orc Boar Boys going to be roaming the battlefield. We have a pair of those on both sides, and then we have some nasty Skulkers to boot on the flanks. And of course, they do have stock, and they have that nice little smoke bomb, which is going to be able to give everything a nice little slow for 72 speed and 72 charge speed reduction as well. It's going to help those Orc Boar Boys going to be getting a nice little bit of an advantage in getting that charge off when they need it most. For the infantry, we do have some Night Goblins. This is going to be the 8 Peak Loonies, so they do have their Fanatics. And then for the rest of the units, we do have some Goblins mixed in with some Orc Boys for that front line, so going pretty wide formations on both sides, really looking to spread each other out as much as possible. For the Lord, we do have a Goblin Great Shaman going to be up on their Arachnarok Spider, and he's going to be bringing the Crown of Command to really help with that low leadership, because he does only have, 64 right now with a little bit of a buff to that, but overall, his leadership is not really all too great. It is only base 55. So, and especially just kind of making sure things stay in the fight when it is needed most. We also do have a Don't Even Try It, a nice little damage dealing effect there. We have for the spells, it'll be Gorkle Fix It, giving a little bit of extra control to the field. Vindictive Glare, especially being up on that Arachnarok Spider, will provide a nice little bit of a vantage point for that spell. And Sneaky Stabbin' as well, so that gives a little bit extra armor piercing and melee attack, so that will help those Orc Boar Boys a little bit more in that fight, especially against those Questing Knights. And a Goblin Big Boss with They Needs a Stabbin', and They Need Stabbin' is just a nice little Roman debuff, so minus 30 armor and 24 melee defense to any lord or hero. So that's pretty much the exact same thing as the Sword of Corone on the Sword of Corone. So exact same thing, just on the Goblin Big Boss, and is only a single target as well. And then for the long range, we do have the Hammer of Gork, which does have blinded, so be able to kind of just help a little bit more with those engagements, and it will just do quite a bit of good damage to cav to boot as well. But that is going to be it for both sides, so let's get things rolling. Already, King Lewin going to be diving down into the Force Goblin Spider Riders, as the peasant mob's going to be pushing forward, keep making sure everything stays nice and pushed back away from the peasant bowmen, so the peasant bowmen should be able to just fire in, but nothing really is going to be able to get a good chance of firing the other way. We have a Vindictive Glare coming up from that Goblin Great Shaman, going to be going right into King Lewin, doing a nice little bit of chip damage to him, with the rest of the Bretonnian cav charging on forward. Down goes that smoke bomb right on those Knights of the Realm, going to be slowing those guys down. And that should allow these Orc War Boys to get right on top of them. But there is plenty of other cav in the area. So these Orc War Boys are going to be trying to catch up to the charge. And the rest of the Knights Drum are going to be turning and charging themselves. And they'll get a nice counter charge into those Orc War Boys. Especially with the help of King Lewin's going to be diving down as well. Popping that Sword of Corone, giving that reduction to that melee defense and armor. And these Orc War Boys are melting very, very fast. Nasty Skulkers do get routed as well. So this flank is going fairly well for the Bretonnians. If you look on the other side, though, some more of their units is going to be routing. I mean, just some peasants. We do get a nice little Fanatics cast going to be going on through the lines, right through the Holy Wardens, as well as these Questing Knights, doing a ton of damage to these guys. Is going to be doing a bit of friendly fire, but most of that damage is going to be going the way of the Bretonnians. Those Questing Knights just taking so much damage, especially with that Hammer Gork also firing on in, doing a ton of damage on that side. So kind of both sides kind of exchanging their respective flanks here. I mean, these Orc War Boys took a ton of damage, but the Questing Knights as well took a ton to boot. But so far, the Lords and Heroes on both sides are still sitting nice and healthy. But the battle is far from decided yet, as there is plenty more engagements to be going for the rest of this fight. Hard to say which side has the advantage at this point. I mean, there's still plenty of battle pilgrims left, and they are going to be very helpful, especially because there's the infantry on the Greenskins just don't have the stopping power to deal with them very effectively, and the Questing Knights do have a nice little bit of regrowth going their way. Going to be healing them up as they do look to put some pressure into the back line here. Get onto that Hammer Gork. It has used about half of its total ammunition, and there's all of this skirmish potential for the Greenskins also just kind of continually just plucking away their shots as best they can, as they slowly kind of bring the Bretonnians to them, as they kind of just center around their artillery piece here. But more of that frontline engagement is about to get underway. We do get a nice little bit of healing and Earthblood going down, healing up these Knights of the Realm, as these Orc War Boys do have the Crown of Command popped on them. But that is pretty much going to seal their fate, though, because as soon as that thing runs off, they are going to be done and dusted. But it looks like they're just going to straight up die before that is even able to happen. But this allow them to just hold that line for as long as possible, and the Goblin Great Shaman does get a nice charge in. The Wa does go off for the Greenskins as well, given that Venus Psychology, a melee attack, base weapon damage, and armor piercing across the board to all of its units, with Bretonnians slowly clawing ahead in that balance of power initially. But the Greenskins, they are not to be counted out of the fight just yet. They have tons of skirmishers still around. But unfortunately, a lot of their units is starting to break. They are routing off I mean, they have goblins for the most part. For the front line is all that's really holding at this point. But the Goblin Great Shaman should be able to do a nice bit of work. However, King Lewin himself is dueling very, very effectively into that Goblin Great Shaman, as he is taking quite a bit of damage. All that poison coming in from all sides here from the Bretonnians, as they all are trying to focus down the Goblin Great Shaman, and King Lewin going to be able to terrify off the Goblin Big Boss. Another hit might be enough to rout it, and there he does go. And that poison really is kind of needed in that frontline engagement for the Greenskins. They need to start getting those shots in. I mean, King Lewin has taken a ton of damage, but he is going to be healing up throughout all of this. He does have that regen after all, while the Great Shaman does not have any healing available to him, though he should be able to get some nice shots off, though King Lewin going to be continually hounding that Goblin Great Shaman. A nice little charge in. The Sword of Corone does go down, but then we also do have... I'm not really sure what all of these abilities are going down here. We do see an Earthblood in there, going to be healing up. It is a Gorkle Fix-It is what was being casted from the Greenskin side there, reducing that speed, charge bonus on all of that. But that Great Shaman is in a very bad spot, and the Bretonnians are very heavily in favor now in the balance of power, doing quite well in that late game. They have enough mobility that the Questing Knights finishing, chasing off some stuff, and all of their Peasant Bowmen are very, very healthy. I don't think they've taken a single bit of damage throughout this game yet. The Vorskam Spider Riders, I think this is the first time they're going to be able, and just as I was about to say that, they do finally rout, and that is going to be it, as we do have Crown of Command, though, popped on the Goblin Great Shaman, but that is going to be all she wrote. The Bretonnians will take game one, and that puts RiffleShuffle up in the lead here, 1-0 going into game two. So let's update that scorecard real quick, and then we'll go over how things fared on both sides in this first match. So for the Greenskins, led by Alfredino, just kind of quickly going over that, Hammer Gork actually did some decent work throughout that fight. Some nice shots into those Questing Knights, Battle Pilgrims, and the like. But the rest of the forces, I mean, just all the Force Gun Spider Riders, they just really didn't do so well. It's usually see these guys have quite a bit of value generated throughout the fight. And unfortunately, they just weren't able to do that. They got pushed back, and they weren't able to lend that poison to that frontline engagement. That was something the Bretonnians definitely did not falter for. And yeah, just the rest of the units just not really doing so hot. lot. However, the AP Gloonies did quite well. They have a very beautiful Fanatics cast, ripping right through 2 of the Questing Knights, the Holy Wardens. Lots of good stuff on that front, but unfortunately that was really all that really performed all too well. Goblin Grey Shaman did pretty good work, 2600 on him. But if we look over at the Bretonnians, we have the Questing Knights doing quite well, but really they're I guess their impact on the battle was pretty mitigated early on, because, I mean, that Fanatics cast just wrecked them so very early. The rest of the Knights of the Realm also just didn't do all too hot themselves. I mean, nothing to write home about. However, all of these peasant bowmen, I mean, this was really kind of one of the big things here, is they were able to just fire freely throughout the entire fight. The Greenskins just couldn't put enough pressure on to really kind of force them back, stop them from shooting or anything like that. So it was constant poison on that front line from the Bretonnian side, and just that steady damage is just really, really racks up if you allow them to shoot throughout the course of the fight. Battle Pilgrims, they really didn't see as many engagements as the rest of the units, but otherwise, just kind of quickly going through there. King Lewin, only 1300, so really, I mean, nothing really too over the top on the Bretonnians either. Peasant Bowman was probably kind of the biggest thing, really able to, just as I said before, just continually firing away throughout the whole battle, and that really kind of tilted the engagements in their favor, especially considering all the Force Count Spider Riders were pushed back far enough where they weren't able to lend that poison back the other way. But that is going to be it for Game 1. Let's roll right on into Game 2. Sons of Sigmar, stand tall, because here there be monsters. As the Empire faces off against the Lizardmen, we'll have RiffleShuffle on the Empire side, and Alfredino commanding the Lizardmen for Game 2 of this best of 3 series. For the Empire, we do have swordsmen, some spears for that kind of front line, and then in that secondary line, we are going to be seeing a unit of great cannons, and then also a Free Company militia for a little bit of gunpowder into the mix. Some more spears kind of spread out, just kind of protecting those cannons, and then we do have some halberdiers and the Sigmar sons as well, who are unbreakable, so a very nice holding tool here for the Empire. And then in the tree line, it is going to be some Demigryph Knights with halberds and the Royal Altdorf Griffites, who do have armor piercing, bonus versus large, and they do have fear and terror to boot, while the regular demis just have fear, so that it essentially gives them that immune to psychology. We do have a Jade Wizard bring in Earthblood and Regrowth, and that Regrowth and Earthblood is going to be going towards those demis a bit, but also it is going to be going towards Karl Franz, who is rolling in up on his Griffin. Deathclaw being given terror to the skies, as he's going to be bringing that Reichling Runefang 24 melee attack and leadership, as well as Gal Maraz, which gives plus 16 bonus versus large and plus 50% armor piercing weapon damage to boot. He also does have Stand Your Ground and Foe Seeker. For the mobility department, for the, skirmishers, we do have a couple of Outriders as well, and with their armor-piercing values, they'll do quite well against some of the big dinos on the Lizardman side of things. And speaking of Lizardmen, what they have brought, we have 4 Chameleon Skinks in that front line. For more ranged units, we do have some Skink Cohort with Javelins on both sides here. We have a total of 4 of these guys. They only have a few rounds of ammunition, but they can do quite a bit of damage at close range. And then, of course, they are just pretty much just Skinks in melee, so they get that poison off for their initial 3 volleys, and then right into that melee grind. And it is going to be Saurus Warriors, though, for the bulk of that front line, 3 units of those. We also do have the cohort of Sotek, which are unbreakable, and of course immune to psychology in that as well. For the dinos, it is going to be a pair of Bastiladon solar engines, going to be providing some shots from long range, and they do flaming attacks and magical attacks as well, so they'll be able to do some nice bit of damage to those cav. And then we have Lord Mazdamundi going to be rolling in on Zlak. He's going to be bringing a ton of abilities, as is the case with most Slans, so of course he does have that cold-blooded Greater Arcane Conduit, Net of Amnentok, Harmonic Convergence, Apotheosis, and then he also has Shield the Old Ones. He has his Bound Banishment and the Ruination of Cities. So Zlak, Mazdamundi on Zlak, going to be a very hard one to bring down, but we do have Karl Franz on the Empire side to lend his support in that regard, as well as those cannons, which are already singing. So let's get things rolling, as the Lizardmen going to be advancing upon the Empire's location. Now the Empire do have to fire over this ridge a little bit, so the Great Cannon's not going to be able to provide as much support as they like. They're going to have to be kind of redirecting their fire to kind of fire over this hill. But as for now, the shots are going to be able to make connections with Zlok, going to be firing on through the trees and going just over the crest of that hill. But that is actually going to stop the solar engines as well from getting some good lines of fire. So both sides can have a little bit of obstructions, but the Great Cannon right now has just a little bit better arc of fire to be able to start continually landing shots against Lord Mazdamundi, and Karl Franz just trying to juke and dodge as much of these chameleon skinks as the swordsman going to be pushing up, just kind of keeping these guys away for as much as possible, because I mean they will still do quite a bit of damage to Karl Franz if they are able to all fire in at once. But the Royal Altdorf Griffite's going to be charging right into the Saurus Warriors, doing a nice brutal charge, and there's no real cavalry on the Lizardman side to really counteract that, so these guys going to have pretty free reign. They're just pretty much going to have to contend with Lord Mazdamundi and just slowly kind of get whittled down by all of the chameleon skinks. So they do want to bring those guys down, and hopefully the solar engines are able to get some shots as well. We do get an overcasted net of Amnitok as well as the shield, the old ones, and these solar engines are going to be electing to go right into melee here as they do charge on forward, and there is that ruination of city doing so much damage. I mean, those Outriders just got absolutely destroyed. Very nice luck on the draw there for those throngs of the or the tendrils of that ruination, able to rout off both of these Outriders, especially with these Bastildons charging on in. But most of the Empire's forces is being, or the most expensive forces of the Empire is being consolidated on the other flank, trying to break down these Saurus Warriors, who do have Harmonic Convergence and Cold-Blooded, but there is a nice little banishment there, but it's going to be going kind of off into no man's land as now the Demigryph Knight's going to be charging right on into Lord Mazdamundi, and Lord Mazdamundi has taken so much damage in this fight, and he is really going to be needed if they want to bring down Karl Franz, all of these Demigryph Knights. But away he does go. He is going to be routing off the field, taking another mighty hit from Karl Franz, and that might be all she wrote for Lord Mazdamundi. I don't know if he's going to be coming back just yet, especially with Karl Franz getting another dive down, going to be plucking away at him as he does retreat. But otherwise, the rest of the forces, the Bastildons, going to be firing away, hitting these Outriders, and then the rest of the forces, I mean, most of the attention is going to be drawn over here to this pocket engagement, and most everything else is just kind of left to their own devices. Cannons are still firing away, but it seems like the Lizardmen definitely focusing heavily on this engagement here, trying to get as many shots into Karl Franz as they can, and just trying to just push things back and allow for Lord Mazdamundi to come back. But they do have the Jade Wizard in hot pursuit, going to be chasing down the big dino himself, and we'll be seeing if he is good. I think right now that Jade Wizard is going to be close enough to make sure that Lord Mazdamundi does stay off the field. The balance power is still fairly even, slightly in the Empire's favor at this point, but here we're going to start seeing a little bit of a shift as the Great Cannon crew is going to be pushed off by the Saurus Warriors. And I mean, we still have the Free Company Militia firing on in, some Spearmen coming in to support, but the Saurus Warriors should be able to beat all of these. I mean, if these Outriders on the other hand turn and start firing away, that'll be a different story. The Solar Engine is able to rout off these Outriders with another shot, going to be firing away, and the Halberdiers also taking quite a bit of damage. But now that Lord Mazdamundi is dealt with, all of the Demigryph Knights and Karl Franz going to be returning their attention to these Bastildons, going to be charging on in. But I look away for a second, and Karl Franz has taken a ton of damage. All of these chameleon skinks are just continually trying to focus him down. And I mean, Karl Franz, when he's up there, he has 100 armor, but all of these shots are just applying poison constantly, slowing him down, reducing his combat effectiveness, and they have done a ton of damage so far, and he is getting really danger low, and that Jade Wizard is very far away, and now that Jade Wizard chasing things down is going to come back to bite the Empire, as the Jade Wizard is not close enough to give that regrowth to Karl Franz when he needs it most, and he is going to be routing right now, and he is getting very, very close to that white line, and the Solar Engines should be able to continue firing away and make sure that he does get sent off. He might be able to stabilize his leadership, but it looks like he is going to go right off the map, and away goes the Lord for the Empire. And with that, the balance of power shifts pretty heavily into the favor of the Lizardmen, so they were pretty much both sides traded for that. But man, yeah, that Jade Wizard definitely made me regretting its decision of chasing down Mazdamundi. As we look at what's left, all of the Royal Altdorf Griffites, the Demigryph Knights are all taking so much damage. I mean, these chameleon skinks just continually firing away, and they have racked up a ton of damage. And seeing that things really stacked against them, RiffleShuffle will concede. And Alfredino does take game 2, so let's take a look at the after battle report, update the scorecard as well. So now it is going to be 1-1, so we're going into game 3, the rubber match. But first, let's see how things did on both sides. So the Solar Bastildons really were engaged in melee for the most part throughout the whole fight. They did get some nice shots in, kind of clearing out some of the Outriders, and a few send-off shots to Karl Franz to boot as well. But really, the Chameleon Skinks were what kind of won the day for the Lizardmen. So just taking a look at their value, I mean, these guys getting 1,100, 900 on those guys, 800 on them, another one almost at 800 as well. So a ton of value from those Chameleon Skinks, because they turned a very likely loss into a win when they just, because they lost Lord Mazdamundi so very fastly to those Altor Griffites, the Demis, the Karl Franz, all really condensed on him and took him out of the picture very quickly. But the Chameleon Skinks definitely were able to pull that back at a lot of steady damage. And then just kind of take a look at the rest of the units here. Skink Cohort's not really doing all too hot. However, the Cohort of Sotek did very well. 1,000 units on, or 1,000 points on these, and they still had a lot of their units left. And then even the Saurus Warriors were able to really just chew through all of the state troops. I mean, the Saurus Warriors are just so strong against the Empire forces in terms of like for the infantry engagements, but the monsters are on the favor of the Lizardmen. So we have 1,500 on Lord Mazdamundi. Now take a look at how the Empire did. The Great Cannons did very well, 1,400 on them. They were a little obstructed early on, but yeah, they just did so much damage. I mean, maybe go with another one, but actually another one of the big kind of deciding factors. I mean, these Outriders got absolutely destroyed by Ruination kind of early in that fight, and that really reduced their effectiveness. I think one of them actually ended up kind of getting a little forgotten, so wasn't able to get some good shots off. The Royal Altdorf Griffites getting 1,000, the other one getting 1,000 as well. Unfortunately, though, for their cost, that is not really cost effective on their end. Free Company Militia, Sigmar's Sons, nothing else was really doing all too well, and even Karl Franz only 1,100. And definitely, I think the big thing though, that Jade Wizard needed to stay close to Karl Franz because he needed that regrowth there at the end, and getting that regrowth would have kept him in the fight and very well could have led to an Empire win instead had he been able to stay fighting for longer. But otherwise, that is it for game 2. Let's roll right on in to game 3. The Legions of the Druchii march forth as they look to emerge victorious against the Skaven, as RiffleShuffle commands the Dark Elves, of Alfredino on the Skaven. So for the Dark Elf forces, it is going to be Bleak Swords spread out across that front line. Another very wide deployment here, and it is going to be Malice Darkblade as the Lord. He's going to be rolling in on his cold one. And for abilities, he does bring the Blood Price, which gives him a nice little bit of damage resistance, base weapon damage, armor-piercing weapon damage as well, at the cost of a little bit of damage to himself. And then we have that Demon's Curse, which does, again, a little bit of damage to himself, and then minus 16 leadership and 24 melee defense in an AoE centered around himself. And then we, of course, have his Zarkan transformation, which one he does transform, it will start to do damage bit by bit, so it will slowly kill him. But to counteract that, we do have the Warp Sword of Cain, which is going to be giving himself a nice little bit of 8 hit points per second and 5% damage resistance when he is engaged in melee. And of course, he does have the Murderous Prowess to boot as well. For us, the forces, we do have some Dread Spears in the back line, going to be protecting a pair of Dark Shards, and we do have a Sorceress of Beasts going to be coming in with the transformation of Kadan and Flock of Doom. For mobility, we have a couple of Dark Riders in the rear on that side, and then on the other side, we do have a Scourge Runner Chariot with a couple more Dark Riders and the Doomfire Warlocks. The Doomfire Warlocks do come with a couple bound spells themselves, so they do have Soul Blight and the Lesser Doombolt, giving a little bit of extra EPS and utility for those guys. And then for the Skaven side, we are going to have a pair of Night Runners kind of up in the front, going to get some shots in, some nice little steady DPS, and there is going to be quite a bit of mobility as well, as we have Wolf Rats with Poison, some regular Wolf Rats for that armor piercing and magical attacks, and then we have the Packmaster coming on in on his Brood Horror. So he does have the Shot Caller, which gives 24 melee attack, plus 16 leadership and immune to psychology for any Clan Molder monsters. And then he does have the Frenzy Scurry Away, so that is going to be all he is bringing, so he doesn't have that regeneration ability for the stuff around him. For the rest of the forces, though, it is going to be some Skaven Slaves for that front line, and they are going to be centered around a Grey Seer, a Plague, who is going to be rolling on in. I believe he's going to be bringing that dreaded 13th. One of the big reasons why you bring the Veracier is that spell, and as well as Vermintide for some more Clan Rat summons. We have the Warp Storm Scroll for any like Harpies or whatever like that. It's going to be very effective against them. And then we have Arcane Conduit to boot as well. And then for the range department, we do have the Natty Boo Boo Sharpshooters, the Warplock Giselles ROR, who do have Snipe and Stock, a very nice combination of abilities for that. We do have the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep for the quick mobility, kind of roaming that back line, and there is going to be some Poison Wind Mortars as well, providing some nice Poison Wind onto the field. And I believe this is the second Pack Master, I believe, on that side, unless he's already cycled around. But yeah, there is 2 Pack Masters, and he's going to be rolling with the same pair of Wolf Rats, 1 Poison, 1 regular, and then we are just going to have some Clan Rat Spears and Clan Rats in that back line, just kind of a little bit more sturdy of a unit there. But for most part, it is going to be a very mobile force and a very all the skirmishers as well. They are going to have to be worried about all of these Dark Riders, especially these Natty Boo Boos, who have gotten just a little bit away, but they were trying to get to this lip on the hill, so they are able to get some nice clean shots into these guys. Those are going to be the armies, so let's get things rolling as both sides are going to be getting their engagements underway. Wolf Rats do get a nice little charge into these big swords, but they need to take quite a bit of damage in return. I don't know if that's necessarily worth it, because they definitely do want to have that mobility late game, so they don't want to be changing those, exchanging those for free. But some very nice shots going to be rolling on in to these Dark Shards from the Poison Wind Mortars, doing a ton of damage, and they will continue to do damage over time with that Poison Wind ability. Night Runner is going to be kiting away from Malice Darkblade, who has trying to get some nice free charges in. We get a summon of Clan Rats here. Going to be just trying to slow things down as Alfredino slowly kites away with the rest of his forces, and this is kind of a strategy I've seen him do before, as he'll just kind of use 1 mortar crew to continually just kind of fire back up, slowly but surely, kind of just wearing it down the opponents. But all these Dark Riders are going to make that a bit harder to do, but it looks like RiffleShuffle is going to be a little bit more cautious with these guys. Most of the Dark Riders going to be still sitting up on top of the hill, as they just kind of look to weather the storm for the most part, and that is going to allow all of these Poison Wind to get some nice damage off onto those Dark Shards, and then just the Giselles as well to get some nice damage. I think the Dark Elves really do need to put some pressure on the back line here. Bounce power is kind of in the favor of the Skaven, though it was kind of that way at the start of the fight. But still, yeah, I think the Dark Elves really do need to put that pressure on with the Dark Riders. They are being very mindful of all of these Wolf Rats, the Packmaster, but now the Skaven are really condensing themselves on one flank, and that is going to now allow the other Dark Riders on the other side to start trying to pull the attention of those of the Skaven on both sides of this engagement, because right now everything is focused on this one side, and really just all this mobility should be able to put a ton of pressure on these Dark Riders and should actually be able to win that very convincingly. Though of course now we do have those Doomfire Warlocks coming on in as well, who do have poison themselves and magical attacks, which will help in these engagements. But yeah, at this point now, you do see those Dark Riders kind of starting to circle around Death Wolf, as the Pit Fighters of Hell's Deep are going to be responding to that, as the Giselles do fire away on top of that to boot. And really, for the Giselles, the Dark Riders and the Scourge Runners are really the 2 targets for these guys to shoot in at. And that Feral Manicore summon from the Sorceress is really just kind of getting wasted at this point for the Dark Elves. It needs to do something other than just kind of sit in the sky. It needs to dive, chase, do something or anything. But right now, here is a rather big engagement, and it looks like we do have the Blood Price going to be getting used on Malice Darkblade. Just kind of getting some nice bit of extra DPS and some resistance, as well as the Doomfire Warlock's going to be charging on in, getting some nice damage. But a Soul Blight does also go down from the Doomfire Warlock, and a nice Bound Scourge from the Plague Priest going to be doing some damage to the Dark Shards and the Bleak Swords. We do have that second Feral Manicore summon going to get caught off, and Malice Darkblade right now is engaging with the Packmaster here. Going to be doing some nice damage both sides. The Scourge Runner as well getting some nice shots off, and there is that Murderous Prowess for the Dark Elves being used right now, with all the kills from all of those summons. Really kind of probably prompted that a bit earlier than would be normal, but the Doomfire Warlocks do get completely dealt with. It does get its Lesser Doom Bolt off. It does some damage to that Packmaster, but they are going to be handled fairly quickly by these Wolf Rats. The rest of the Dark Riders going to be getting a nice charge in, going to rout off one of the units and starting to put some pressure on the rest. Might even be able to rout these guys off. Their leadership is kind of wavering on both sides, but Skaven still looking pretty strong right now. There's just no pressure really on all of the range units. These Poison Wind Mortars, the Giselles, all of that stuff are still online and operational. But we do have these Bleak Swords and these Dread Spears starting to come on in to these Natty Boo Boo Sharpshooters, so these guys are going to have to start pulling on back. And there are some units that are forgotten on the backside. I mean, these Dread Spears are kind of forgotten in the backline there. But most of the mobility now for the Dark Elves is kind of getting really broken down. The Dark Riders have some units left. The Doomfire Warlocks do return, and the Feral Manticore, the last summon here, is going to try and get some damage off onto the Grace here, but unfortunately not able to do a whole lot. The Packmaster, though, does get pushed off by Malice, but now Malice is in a rather bad spot right now, as he is getting beaten down by the Packmaster and the Pit Fighters, and at this point he might want to be using Zarkan here if he wants to kind of survive this engagement, as he is taking quite a bit of damage. We do get a charge from that Dark Rider, and it does look like we have, that is the blood price being used again, which does give him that damage resistance, so it really kind of counteracts when he is in an engagement. So he saves a bit of damage, but he does deal some to himself. The Jezzails finally getting pushed back. They did take quite a bit of damage, and really the Doomfire Warlocks at this point, there's no pressure on them. They are trying to chase off these Wolf Rats, but really they should probably turn their attention to those Natty Boo Sharpshooters. They do have a nice opportunity there to finish them off. And Malice, again, just getting beaten down now by all of these Pit Fighters at Hell's Deep. He's getting very, very low. He needs to pop that Zarkan right here and now, and I think that is it right there. It is winding up, and there it is. Malice with Darkblade transforms just as he was about to die there. He does pop Bloodstorm as well, and then a nice little explosion going to be pushing off these Clan Rats and the Pit Fighters, and the balance power now in the favor of the Dark Elves, but now time is the enemy of the Dark Elves, as Malice Darkblade is going to be taking damage bit by bit over the course of the rest of the fight here. So if the Skaven can kind of slow things down at this point, wait for Malice, or I guess Zarkan at this point, to take that damage that he's just going to be constantly taking, give him a little bit of extra shots from the Natty Boo Boos, and things are going to be looking pretty good. So we do have a Feral Manticore. I believe I must have missed, it must have been just a regular Manticore then that was on the field for the Dark Elves that I must have missed earlier on, because here is the summon. So this should be the second summon now. Must have missed one from earlier, or must have missed the regular units from earlier. So here is that summon. It is going to be trying to chase down, but it has that Warp Storm Scroll, which is minus 48% speed, just kind of allowing the rest of the Skaven to kind of get away. And there is a dreaded 13th, so the Stormvermin with Halberds. So now that Grace here going to be trying to probably just sit in tight with the Stormvermin, kind of keep that Feral Manticore at bay, and the other Feral Manticore, which I believe is the regular unit, is going to be chasing down those Pit Fighters on the far flank. But balance power now is right back to even, as kind of all of these Packmasters here just slowly getting a little bit of health back bit by bit as they regen, and the longer things wait now, it is going to be on the side of the Skaven, as Malice, on the other hand, taking more and more damage the longer he is on the field, and so he needs to make his presence known quickly, while all of these Packmasters are just going to be very content of just slowing down the pace. There's plenty of mobility left for the Skaven. A lot of things coming back. That Feral Manticore on the far side does get rampaged down into all those units, and the summoned unit does finally drop here. Scourge Runner has used up all of its ammunition and is now just kind of being used as a chariot, but it does get terrified away by these Packmasters, and that is going to allow the Natty Boo Boos to once again kind of start firing away. The Poison Wind Mortar Crews as well are able to return fire against the rest of the Dark Elves, as they just take some send-off shots, going to be trying to land in. Well, all those shots do end up missing, so they're not able to get that Poison Wind, and I think they really need to start targeting this last unit, Dread Spears. It just has the most damage potential left, as the Scourge Runners now get routed off naturally here, as the Packmaster is going to be chasing them down, and the Skaven again just going to be very content with just chasing down all of the routing units, and then eventually we'll just allow Malice or Zarkan at this point to just die of natural causes, as the transformation does take its toll. He is able to rout off the Packmaster, but with that speed it might just be able to regen enough to gain its leadership and return to the field, as now Malice trying to get on top of that Grace here, as the Jezzails firing in at point blank, and I think this is going to be it for Malice Darkblade, as that damage he is taking is just going to be causing himself to finally succumb to that transformation, and the power of Zarkan is going to tear him limb from limb. But it looks like the Skaven going to be winning this fight here, and that will be all she wrote. Alfredino making the comeback, going to be taking the series 2-1. So I'll update the final score to reflect that. And all is not lost, though. RiffleShuffle does get a point, and depending on how the rest of his group has been going, he may still have a very good shot at moving on to the final round. So let's take a look at the after battle report real quick. So the Pitfires of Hell's Deep doing very, very well, 1300 on these guys. And then there's all of the Wolf Rats doing okay work, nothing too ridiculous. These guys can perform very well. It's not uncommon to see some of those guys racking up 1,000 or more. Nanny Booby's doing some good work, 1300. Mortar 16, very good on that end as well. Night Runner's doing decent. So pretty decent value across the board for the Skaven. Unfortunately, the Packmaster, though, that is not going to be the case. Only getting 200 on this guy, 1,000 on that one. And then Grayseer got 600, but it was just really like all the summons just bogging it down. And eventually they were able to push off that Malice, then Zarkan, forcing that transformation, and then played it very, very well, because seeing that transformation then slowed the pace down, let Malice kill himself, and then deal with the rest of the units after that. There was a Feral Manticore, so I did miss that early on. So I kind of missed what I thought was the final summon was actually the first. But otherwise, it did okay, 700. Scourge Runner, 800. Doomfire Warlocks. I think the mobility of the Dark Elves really did, I don't know if they were like too ambitious, or they just took engagements that really wasn't very advantageous. They needed to try and get into the Jezzails and the Mortars earlier on, but all of the roaming Wolf Rats did a very good job of kind of keeping them at bay, just kind of keeping them honest. Dark Shards as well didn't do all too well, but then the frontline units, the Bleak Swords, did okay work kind of across the board. Same with the Dread Spears, nothing too outlandish though. Sorcerer Beasts, I think some of the summons, I mean, with the style of play that Alfredino was having, I mean, the summons really didn't perform quite as well, because it was a very kitey force for Alfredino, and he's played that very, very well. And even Malice really didn't perform admirably either. Even with that extra health coming back from Zarkan, it brought the balance power back to even, but it still wasn't quite enough to win the day. Otherwise, it was a very well played series on both sides. RiffleShuffle did very, very well. Alfredino was a very tough opponent. But that is going to be all I have for you today. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good one.